So I'm curious about the journey of the film. Obviously the book I looked up came out in 2001, which is a while ago. And so I'm curious who optioned it, why, how, was it challenging?
I read a review in the end of '99 and optioned the book in 2000.
And did you do that on your own, or were you working with a company at the time?
No, it was 5 years before we had the money to get a script. A lot of people saying no for 5 years.
So there's a lot of producers in the room, I'm sure. So just about that, because I've actually been working on a film now since 2001 as well, based on a book. So you tried to raise money to get a writer hired, and then you finally did.
To get interest, whether it was studios or financiers or just to get it going.
And was the author involved at all at that point?
I was just writing him a check every year.
That's how it goes. And so then at what point did Anne come on board?
Linda Reisman introduced me to Anne, and the three of us started working together really full on in like 2005.
So I noticed that there's quite a few producers on the credits. Of those, is it kind of clear who did what and who came on when and that process?
Well, like all of these kinds of movies that you try to put together in a long period of time, there are people that are very involved for a period of time and then aren't. So some of the executive producers, weren't active in the actual making of the movie at the point that Tom, came on. Tom was interested in it for a very long time. He had read it in 2008 and he was passionate about it, but then there was a little movie called The King's Speech. And he chose that one.
Gail was the only person who resented the existence of The King's Speech.
But I find that with films like this, it is like Sisyphus, right, pushing the rock up, and that you really need one person or two to really be constantly at it to try to make it happen. What drew you to the material? Each of you.
Well, to me, when I read it, Gail sent it to me in 2004, I think it was, and read it. It was, it was the story. It was a love story in this strange, unique, and completely unexpected way, because it was set, between a husband and a wife, where the husband is undergoing such an extraordinary journey. But to me, I was so moved by this way of looking at a marriage and how people relate, and what you know about a person and what you don't know about a person, and how that evolves. And it really got to me, the nature of love. What is it to love somebody, and how far do you go, and what are the boundaries of it? So to me, that was what drew me in, and obviously the subject matter was incredibly important. I was stupid enough to think that people would see it the way I did and, jump on the bandwagon, but yeah, that was another 10 years.
And you, Tom, what drew you to the material?
Well, I mean, it's unusual to be involved in a film for 7 years and consider yourself a newcomer. But I'm a relative newbie compared to Gail's 15-year journey, Anne's 11-year journey to get this film to the screen. I mean, for me, it was Gail and Anne commissioned Lucinda Coxon to write a script, and there was this 2007 draft that I read and completely fell in love with, and it made me cry more than once and moved me hugely. Like Anne said, I think for me it was the love story at the centre, and it's kind of interesting that in a way both. I was in early pre-production of The King's Speech, and I sort of fell in love with both films at a similar period of my life, and there are some parallels. I mean, I think we all have blocks between us and the best version of ourselves, the true version of ourselves, whether it's shyness, insecurity, anxiety, addiction, depression, stammering, like Bertie in The King's Speech. But to not identify with the gender you're assigned at birth is surely the most profound of blocks. But what moved me was at a time in the 1920s when there was no kind of precursor to this kind of transition. There was no language, there was no word transgender. What created a space where transformation might become possible was this incredible love and this marriage, and that's what drew me to it. And in a way, for me, it's a 7-year journey to honour how moved I was by that screenplay and to want to move you, the audience, as I was moved by that script 7 years ago.
I read some research last night after watching the film, and I read something that you wrote in an interview in The Guardian, and you said, it's about inclusion made possible by love. In the same way that the refugee crisis on the shores of Europe is an appeal to our hearts, what happens to transgender people when they suffer persecution is an appeal to our hearts. What I hope that the film shows is that the only way possible to make inclusion happen is through compassion and love. And for me, that was really, it struck me because some of you know that I founded a refugee relief organization. So I care deeply about using film in a way that, the films that I make are, involve compassion and humanity. And I found that to be what really I connected with most in the film last night, was that, what you were saying, Ed. I'm just curious if there's anything else that you want to say about that in terms of that human experience and how that informs the kinds of films that you make and this film.
I said that when I was at the Venice Film Festival press conference, which was the first time we screened the film, and we were not very far from the shores of the Mediterranean where this incredible influx of people in need was happening, and I was very aware of how there are so many complex and rather subtle and devious mechanisms by which these people in tremendous need are othered by the media or by people who don't want to face the responsibility, and when we should be opening our hearts to this incredible need of these people fleeing from war, we're getting very caught up with our sense of our rights as citizens to not have to support a single person beyond ourselves when we're living in relative affluence. So for me, at that moment, it was felt very. But I suppose, for some reason, I've always been attracted to figures who suffer marginalisation, whether it's Bertie in the King's Speech, whether it's Jean Valjean, marginalised by many years, being degraded and downtrodden as a convict, whether it's John Adams in the miniseries I did, who felt marginalised by history, that he should be alongside Franklin Jefferson Washington as one of the great founding fathers, and he'd been somehow overlooked. Well, I don't know where that comes from, but I wanted to make this film in a way that Lily was never othered by us, the filmmakers. That you went on her journey beat for beat, step for step, and through, I suppose Eddie's gift at creating a compassionate connection with the audience. I really hope that we could take people on a journey where Lily's emergence seemed inevitable and necessary.
And it is also about relationships, and I love the part in the film when Gerda says, I think Lily was Einar at the time, and she says, it's not about you, or all about you, right? I'm curious about that aspect of it as well, just the relationship and how it must be so challenging for the people involved with somebody who makes that huge choice of changing gender or expressing themselves in a different way. And just that was such a big part, I felt, of the film, and that it wasn't just about Einar and Lily, it was really also about the people in her life.
Well, I would just say one thing that Alicia always says, which makes so much sense to me, is that it's both of them are undergoing a transition. It's not just one, it's both of them, and each person has to get over it. And the anger and the confusion and all of those things that are part of understanding this. I feel like that was what this story and Tom's